This advertisement is paid for by Meirowitz and Wasserberg.
Welcome to our program. I'm Dr. Wendy Walsh, and with me today are attorneys Samuel Meirowitz and Daniel Wasserberg, co-founders of the firm Meirowitz and Wasserberg, LLC, and the Meso law firm. Samuel and Daniel's firms are recognized nationally for successfully obtaining millions of dollars in verdicts and settlements for victims of mesothelioma and lung cancer. Welcome, Samuel and Daniel.
Great to be here.
And may I call you Sam and Dan?
Everyone who knows us does.
Now, before we get into today's topic, I want to tell our viewers a little more about each of you and what I find to be really impressive about your backgrounds. First of all, Samuel Meirowitz is an accomplished trial lawyer and a relentless advocate for his clients. He's a member of the top 100 trial lawyers and a super lawyer every year since 2016. His partner, Daniel Wasserberg, is originally from Houston, Texas. Daniel Wasserberg has been selected to the New York Metropolitan Super Lawyer list every year since 2013. For the past 3 years, Daniel Wasserberg has been recognized by the National Trial Lawyers as a top asbestos attorney. Gentlemen, those are some very impressive resumes. I'm happy that you're here today. Let's start with some really basic questions because a lot of people still don't know the answers. What is asbestos and how has it been used and why is it so dangerous, Samuel?
Well, Wendy, it's a great question. A lot of people don't realize that what makes asbestos so amazing as a fire retardant or as an insulator is that it is indestructible. It is basically a light, tiny little indestructible mineral. And as indestructible as it is against high-pressure steam or fire, it's also sometimes indestructible against your body's natural defense mechanisms.
Right, so your body can't break it down.
It can't break it down. It can't get rid of it. And they stay there for years and years and years until, unfortunately, they can develop into cancer.
Now, where has it been used in the past?
In many different applications, some that would blow people's minds. I mean, typical applications would be on pipe covering or any of the thermal insulation products, spray insulation. It is ubiquitous in many ways, falling into brake linings, going into joint compounds for drywall. It would be in shingles, roofing tiles, ceiling tiles, floor tiles, a whole bunch of different products, thousands of products really, for many, many, many years.
There must be occupations that present a particularly high risk of asbestos exposure. Which ones are they?
In line with what Sam just described with the insulation and the pipe covering, you've got the pipe fitters, the insulators, the plumbers, and people like that, boiler makers, people who worked on the large boilers. But then there's also all of these construction workers like carpenters, tile installers, painters, tapers, floaters, people who do that kind of work. Additionally, and we represent a lot of people who were in the Navy. The Navy utilized a tremendous amount of asbestos, and I'm sure that you've heard about the 9/11 Victims Compensation Fund, and so the firefighters, the police officers, the EMS, the first responders, essentially those are the folks that were hit the hardest, and other people who lived at ground zero. You can remember seeing the visible dust after the buildings came down. Well, it turns out that that dust did have asbestos in it, and it was very dangerous.
And what about the automotive repair industry?
Auto mechanics were hard hit by asbestos in brakes, clutches, gaskets. One of the things to remember is that auto mechanics did smoke a lot when smoking was very popular, when it was the thing to do. Many of our clients with lung cancer and even mesothelioma were smokers who also were breathing in the asbestos dust from these automotive products that we just mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, sorry to jump in, but what they call that is a super additive effect. So people who were exposed to asbestos and smoked cigarettes were, as Daniel was pointing out, at an even higher risk because of that super additive effect.
But as I understand it, it's important that if somebody was a smoker and they have a lung cancer diagnosis, they should still call a lawyer because they won't be disqualified because they were smokers.
They will not be disqualified.
Right.
We have had great success in cases where our clients smoked cigarettes. Obviously, it's a factor in the case, but we are more than happy to investigate and see if we can put a case together for anyone who's developed mesothelioma or lung cancer.
Are there estimates as to the total number of workers still exposed to on-the-job asbestos risk that could lead to mesothelioma or lung cancer diagnosis?
Clearly, there are millions of people who are exposed to asbestos on a regular basis. There's an estimate out there that 20% of public buildings, not even private buildings, still contain asbestos today, that over 750,000 structures, including many, many schools, still have asbestos in them in the United States.
We should say that some of those terrifying statistics you just mentioned came from the EPA, so they're aware that there are a lot of buildings that still have asbestos and continue to pose a risk of asbestos exposure. Are there estimates as to the number of people who sadly pass away every year from mesothelioma or a lung cancer diagnosis?
Well, with respect to mesothelioma, there's typically 3,000 to 4,000 people that are diagnosed every year. Lung cancer, the number's much higher.
There are about 250,000 lung cancer cases diagnosed in the United States every year. Now, clearly, not all of those are asbestos cases. However, a large number of them are asbestos cases. Again, we're willing to review your case for free, confidentially, even if you smoked.
Samuel and Daniel, you've shared some really important information with our viewers today. And right now, let's take a moment to let anyone who has questions about the rights they might have if they've been diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer after exposure to asbestos, call the Meso Law Firm helpline now. And we'll be right back. Have you or a loved one been diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer or female reproductive cancer after exposure to asbestos? You may be entitled to significant compensation for your injuries, but time is limited to file your claim. Every year, thousands of people are diagnosed with mesothelioma and lung cancer after exposure to asbestos. And exposure asbestos companies have known for decades could cause deadly diseases, but concealed that danger from the public. As a result, over $30 billion have been awarded to compensate victims of asbestos-related diseases, including mesothelioma and lung cancer. If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer after exposure to asbestos, you need to call the Meso Law Firm, a law firm recognized nationally for successfully obtaining over $500 million in verdicts and settlements for victims of asbestos-related illnesses, including mesothelioma and lung cancer. Time is limited to file a claim, so call the Meso Law Firm now for a free case review. Welcome back to our show. I'm Dr. Wendy Walsh, and with me today are Samuel Meirowitz and Daniel Wasserberg, founding attorneys with the law firm of Meirowitz and Wasserberg and the Meso Law Firm. Our topic on today's program is the protection of the rights of viewers who've been diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer after exposure to asbestos. I'm curious to know about the manufacturers of these products. What kind of actions have they taken to now start to protect the public?
Wendy, the great majority of companies have removed asbestos from their products. Some still remain, but for the most part, they have. The key is a lot of the exposures took place back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, when these companies did know about the dangers of asbestos, but did not pass that knowledge on to the consumer. You got to warn people if there's a dangerous hazard, particularly if there's a hidden danger associated with something. So our cases are often based upon this failure to warn premise that even though all this information was out there to the industry, even though inside industry there was an awareness of these dangers associated with asbestos, there was no warnings. That was not passed on to the consumer. And why do you think that is? It's putting profits over people.
So it sounds like the actions taken by manufacturers have probably not been all they could be. But what kind of action has the government taken to protect people from asbestos exposure, the kind that leads to mesothelioma or lung cancer?
In the early 1970s, the government created OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health. And most people don't know this. Dr. Walsh, but OSHA was created as a response to the crisis with asbestos. Nobody was willing to take action. So the government actually decided to take action. And over the years, the rules surrounding asbestos have gotten stricter. There are more requirements and so on and so forth about workplace safety.
In terms of mesothelioma and lung cancer, tell our viewers more about how it's contracted.
The simple answer, Wendy, is that breathing in the dust is how it gets inside your body.
What's the big difference between mesothelioma and lung cancer?
It's the location. A lot of people get confused and they think, okay, well, mesothelioma is the same thing as lung cancer. It is not. The lung cancer exists in the lung tissue itself. Mesothelioma exists in the lining of the lung. So our lungs have this really cool saran wrap-like lining. This lining is where mesothelioma ends up developing.
What Sam just described as pleural mesothelioma and pleural mesothelioma and lung cancer are often confused by the general public. Let's talk about a few other kinds of mesothelioma. It's still, again, on the lining of where it is, right? So peritoneal mesothelioma is going to be on the lining of the abdomen, okay? Pericardial mesothelioma is on the heart. So it's going to be on the lining of the heart. Also, we have seen testicular mesothelioma, which is pretty scary, and we have now seen cases of ovarian mesothelioma.
Talc. You had a $39 million verdict for somebody who'd been exposed to talc. Can you explain?
When I started doing this, we had some women clients, and we could not figure out how they were exposed to asbestos.
Yeah.
We had no idea. So we started investigating this further. Spending money on testing. We use some of the best experts, microscopists, who look at talc, and this is a very expensive procedure, and find out that there are asbestos shards in that talc. They look like little shards when you look at them under a microscope. And those are those same needles that we've talked about throughout the program that get embedded in your lungs and after decades cause mesothelioma. So we're doing a lot of talc litigation. And so even if you didn't work in the trades, say I was a homemaker, I was never married to a plumber pipe fitter, my husband was an accountant, how in the heck did I get mesothelioma? It could be from the products in your bathroom.
There's a trick that the industry played. And if you look at talc under a certain level of magnification, you can see the asbestos fibers if there's a contamination. If you look under a different level of magnification, you won't see it. So what these companies were doing was they were using a different lens that basically they knew would not be able to see the asbestos contamination in the talc. Very sneaky. And so that's what juries get really upset about, because like, wait a minute, you had an opportunity to do something, and then you not only didn't, but you found ways to try to fool the government into thinking that it was safe. Why would they do that? The reason why they would do that, and we're going to go back to where we began, which is it's expensive. It's really expensive to clean the asbestos out of your talc products.
Talc has been known to cause ovarian cancer, and that fits into our asbestos program as well. And that's something that we can help with if, unfortunately, someone's been diagnosed with ovarian cancer.
Samuel and Daniel, you've shared some really important information with our viewers today. And right now, let's take a moment to let anyone who has questions about the rights they might have if they've been diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer after exposure to asbestos, call the Meso Law Firm helpline now. And we'll be right back. Have you or a loved one been diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer or female reproductive cancer after exposure to asbestos? You may be entitled to significant compensation for your injuries, but time is limited to file your claim. Every year, thousands of people are diagnosed with mesothelioma and lung cancer after exposure to asbestos. And exposure asbestos companies have known for decades could cause deadly diseases, but concealed that danger from the public.
As a result, over $30 billion have been awarded to compensate victims of asbestos-related diseases, including mesothelioma and lung cancer. If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer after exposure to asbestos, you need to call the Meso Law Firm, a law firm recognized nationally for successfully obtaining over $500 million in verdicts and settlements for victims of asbestos-related illnesses, including mesothelioma and lung cancer. Time is limited to file a claim, so call the Meso Law Firm now for a free case review.
Welcome back to our show. I'm Dr. Wendy Walsh, and with me today are Samuel Meirowitz and Daniel Wasserberg, founding attorneys with the law firm of Meirowitz and Wasserberg and the Meso Law Firm. Our topic on today's program is the protection of the rights of viewers who've been diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer after exposure to asbestos. What are the typical periods that we're talking about before you actually have symptoms or a diagnosis?
So it takes a long time for this cancer to develop. But typically speaking, the latency period, which is the time between when you're exposed and when you develop a disease, is often decades.
Decades. And let's talk about symptoms. What are some indications that you might have mesothelioma or lung cancer?
The first thing that people notice is a cough for pleural mesothelioma, and pleural mesothelioma is probably about 70% of the mesothelioma. In the case of the abdomen, which is probably most of the other 30% of mesothelioma, that's peritoneal mesothelioma, people will feel pain in their belly. They'll have gastrointestinal problems. They can have a distended stomach where their stomach is sticking out more because it's full of that same kind of fluid. So those are some of the symptoms. That's obviously not all of them, but basically people know there's something wrong.
What are the survival rates for people who are diagnosed with mesothelioma?
For the most part, they fall in the 1 to 4 year range.
And those survival rates have to be devastating news for family members who are diagnosed with mesothelioma.
Mesothelioma is still considered a lethal terminal form of cancer.
Do viewers who are diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer, what are their rights for compensation from these companies who failed to warn them?
There's a variety of different paths that we can take a client down, and they're not mutually exclusive, meaning we can go down both roads. One road is there are companies that are still in business that made asbestos-containing products many, many years ago, exposed people to asbestos, and are still in business, and we can pursue them in the court system, just like any other type of case that would go through the tort system. The other way that we can pursue compensation for our clients is through what's called the trust system. And this pertains to companies that made asbestos-containing products years and years ago, unfortunately poisoned many, many, many people. The companies were doing really well because, as we talked about, they put profits over people. And so their assets at the time that they filed for what's called a special kind of bankruptcy, they were very high. But the people that they exposed to asbestos and caused terminal cancer to cost them potentially millions and millions more. And so they would go to the bankruptcy courts and say, hey, save me from all of the weight of these asbestos lawsuits. So the courts, a lot of them set up what's called asbestos trust funds, and we hear about it sometimes. And these funds are set up to compensate people for these early companies that filed for bankruptcy protection, put money aside, and specially designated that money for people that get diagnosed with asbestos disease.
One of the reasons I wanted to do the program today was to clarify this misconception about one giant bankruptcy trust to compensate the victims of asbestos exposure. But the truth is there are dozens of companies that were part of this process called bankruptcy, and all different times from the 80s to the 90s and through the 2000s that have filed for bankruptcy. And they've created trusts, and those trusts are designed to compensate the victims of asbestos exposure. Each trust requires its own application. Some trusts have very stringent requirements. Some trusts are a little bit easier, but it is not one big trust. There's about 30 to 40 that we routinely see for the great majority of our clients, and then there's about another 10 to 20 that are more specialized, whether by region in the United States or by the type of job description, or maybe it's military only.
Can you apply to multiple trusts?
You can, but that's one of the things why you need a lawyer.
And we don't charge a fee. That's not how this works. We work on what's called a contingency fee. That means that you will only pay a fee if we win, and it doesn't come out of your pocket. It comes out of the defendant's pocket. We settle the case with the defendant, they send us money, and we will get a percentage of that and give the rest to you.
They just hold your hand from beginning to end. So if you need someone that's fully supportive and people that know their P's and Q's, I would highly recommend Sam and Dan.
Samuel and Daniel, you've shared some really important information with our viewers today. And right now, let's take a moment to let anyone who has questions about the rights they might have if they've been diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer after exposure to asbestos, call the Meso Law Firm helpline now. And we'll be right back.
Have you or a loved one been diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer or female reproductive cancer after exposure to asbestos? You may be entitled to significant compensation for your injuries, but time is limited to file your claim. Every year, thousands of people are diagnosed with mesothelioma and lung cancer after exposure to asbestos. And exposure asbestos companies have known for decades could cause deadly diseases, but concealed that danger from the public. As a result, over $30 billion have been awarded to compensate victims of asbestos-related diseases, including mesothelioma and lung cancer. If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer after exposure to asbestos, you need to call the Meso Law Firm, a law firm recognized nationally for successfully obtaining over $500 million in verdicts and settlements for victims of asbestos-related illnesses, including mesothelioma and lung cancer. Time is limited to file a claim, so call the Meso Law Firm now for a free case review.
Welcome back to our show. I'm Dr. Wendy Walsh, and with me today are Samuel Meirowitz and Daniel Wasserberg, founding attorneys with the law firm of Meirowitz and Wasserberg and the Meso Law Firm. Our topic on today's program is the protection of the rights of viewers who've been diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer after exposure to asbestos. So what's the difference between the process required in mesothelioma and lung cancer legal actions as compared to, let's just say in general, other kinds of personal injury legal actions?
With asbestos cases, because it's what we call cumulative disease, meaning that somebody develops mesothelioma or lung cancer, they don't get it from a specific exposure. They get it from the lifetime of exposures, right? And so we talked in the beginning of the program about how there are so many different products.
Yeah, if they worked in construction, it might have been multiple
it could
products.
have been, it could be 20, 30, 40, 50 products. So that's why it's really important to have a lawyer analyze essentially your entire life history of all the ways in which you would be exposed to asbestos, so that the lawyer can look at if any of the companies that made products that expose you to asbestos could be held accountable.
Over here on this one path of viable solvent litigation defendants that Sam described that we're going to put in the lawsuit, there are countless number of defendants, maybe over 100 possible targets for a case. And then over here on the bankruptcy side of the case, you have these trusts. And like I said before, there's 30 or 40 or 50 of those. We really do need to sit down with you, do an intake, find out your whole work history, find out what products you were exposed to, and identify the viable solvent companies that maybe can pay, and identify the bankrupt asbestos defendant trusts that can pay. And through that combination of both defendants on the viable side and the bankrupt side, we hope to be able to achieve a recovery that is commensurate with your compensation that you deserve.
Now, if somebody does have a lawsuit, what kind of damages or rewards can be expected?
Well, there's different categories. First, you look at, is there an economic loss? Did the person stop working as a result of their diagnosis, and did they lose some kind of earning capacity? You look at what is the cost of medical treatment. That's a hard economic loss because treatment is very expensive, as you know. And then you also look at the pain and suffering that someone goes through.
As I've mentioned, this is a lethal terminal form of cancer. So when the person passes away, there may be compensation available for wrongful death.
Right.
So a question we often get is, well, okay, I'm here now with you, but what happens if I pass away? Does my lawsuit continue? And the answer to that is yes.
It's not for nothing to pursue a case, even if you think, sadly, you're not going to survive your day in court.
Is it the same when it's the trust, these bankruptcy trusts that were set up?
It's not the same. These trust funds compensate individuals. It's not in a court system. It's out of court.
So they settle before it ever gets to court?
I could file trust claims for you because technically that is not a lawsuit. Does that make sense?
Right. I think I'm going to know your answer to my next question. Why is legal representation so important in mesothelioma and lung cancer cases?
Really what it is a very specialized area of the law. And you can't sort of learn it overnight. We have that team, and that's what makes us different. So having decades of experience doing this work is really almost impossible to compete with if you're just starting out trying to learn how to be an asbestos lawyer.
Now, your firm is known for successfully representing hundreds of clients with mesothelioma and lung cancer claims, with many multi-million-dollar verdicts and settlements. How have you been able to achieve these results?
Well, it's true. We have a $32 million verdict, a $28.5 million verdict, and most recently, a $39 million verdict. That's just in the last 3 years. We've settled over $500 million in lawsuits related to asbestos.
You know, many people watching today are afraid to pick up the phone because they think lawyers are going to cost them a lot of money. Can you explain further how your fees work?
Absolutely. The thing about our fee structure is that anybody in America can afford us. And the reason for that is that there is no out-of-pocket cost, zero out-of-pocket cost to a client unless we get a recovery. We only get paid if we win.
It's called our no-fee guarantee. If we don't win, you don't pay.
Well, I'm sure our viewers are pleased to know that there's no cost for your firm's representation unless a verdict or settlement is reached. And you provided so much important information that's going to be helpful to so many of our viewers and their families, whether they're dealing with mesothelioma, a lung cancer diagnosis, or, as you said, a female reproductive cancer. Thank you so much for joining us today, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer after exposure to asbestos, call the Meso Law Firm at the number on your screen now for more information and a free case review. Thanks for watching.
Have you or a loved one been diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer or female reproductive cancer after exposure to asbestos? You may be entitled to significant compensation for your injuries, but time is limited to file your claim. Every year, thousands of people are diagnosed with mesothelioma and lung cancer after exposure to asbestos. And exposure asbestos companies have known for decades could cause deadly diseases, but concealed that danger from the public. As a result, over $30 billion have been awarded to compensate victims of asbestos-related diseases, including mesothelioma and lung cancer. If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer after exposure to asbestos, you need to call the Meso Law Firm, a law firm recognized nationally for successfully obtaining over $500 million in verdicts and settlements for victims of asbestos-related illnesses, including mesothelioma and lung cancer. Time is limited to file a claim, so call the Meso Law Firm now for a free case review.
This advertisement is paid for by Meirowitz and Wasserberg.